So, what's next? Is it really iThings and apps, apps on apps, apps all the way down? I hope not. I think the future of computing is about enchantment. If you look at the way that enchantment is presented, or the way that magic is presented in stories, in comic books, in other narratives, what you find is that it's embodied. It's embodied in specific things, usually specific things that are augmented for a specific purpose that drive the narrative forward. For Lucy, in Narnia, it was a potion that was magically healing. It was shoes in The Wizard of Oz that had magical teleportation capabilities. For Wonder Woman, there were a lot of magical things about Wonder Woman. But her lasso, when you were ensnared in her lasso, you were forced to tell the truth. So it was sort of an omniscience fantasy, among others. In Middle-earth, there were lots of objects that were augmented. Frodo had food bags that never ran out. He had a line that would never break. And he also had Sting, which was a sword that knew when orcs were nearby, which was very convenient. I started a company about 10 years ago called Ambient Devices that was inspired to make enchanted things. And one of the things that we made was an umbrella that knew from AccuWeather whether it was going to rain, which would be useful on a day like today. Now, you notice that the important thing is that the affordances, as Don Norman says, are already there for the enchantment of the umbrella. You don't really have to spend very long talking about what the usefulness of the umbrella is, or what the extra enchanted ability that it has for these LEDs to pulse and for not to forget it. So for you and me, we're the enchanters, right? So the question is, what shall we enchant? What shall we enchant today? We surround ourselves with so many objects that could be imbued with incredibly low-cost computation or connectivity to add extra features to those things. I think the place that you go to answer that question is the history of the future, because the history of the future reveals timeless fantasies, desires, and wishes that we can tap into. We can also look at narratives where these primal wishes are revealed through narratives that you and I both know. I think this is more of a psychology problem. Well, certainly for this woman, it was a psychology problem. It was a narcissistic problem, but it's more than a technology problem. So I want to present with you today pairs of historical fantasies and new inventions that leverage that same insight. So first, the desire to know. Technology helps us in lots of ways. Druids used glass balls to help in clairvoyance or seeing the future. This was a device that was handy for the Wicked Witch of the West to deploy the monkeys to the right place to find Dorothy. 10 years ago, I created an object called an orb, where the fantasy was about speed. The fantasy was about how do you put information into people's heads without even causing any sort of cognitive load, so that you would pay attention and know without even knowing that you're knowing. The orb could be programmed to show the temperature. What cognitive psychologists call this is pre-attentive processing. So as opposed to Facebook or Twitter that distract you from tasks, when designed right, these are devices that can exist in your subconscious or semi-conscious and not overwhelm your cognitive load. And they're programmable, so you can track pollen count if you're asthmatic, or skiing forecasts if you do that, or wind speed wherever you sail, first derivative of barometric pressure, which is indicative of fish biting, energy pricing, gardening, the need for watering. And I think one of the things that we learned was that displaying information in glanceable ways, where it's unavoidable, changes people's behavior. And this is also true of groups. There's a bank in North Carolina that called me and said, how do we put a lot of orbs in this giant monolith to show real-time customer satisfaction? So therefore, everybody who's walking in the bank, including the employees, will know how they're doing in real time. It also sits next to a highway, so everyone driving by the bank knows how they're doing if they can read the color. Communication is a fantasy that we've seen evidenced in all of these embedded technologies for a long time. Maxwell Smart had it right, but maybe embedded in the wrong place. Look, FaceTime. This is a four-square clock that was in the Weasleys' kitchen. The Weasleys were a large family of friends of Harry Potter's, and the Weasley clock showed location-based service, which would show you a needle for each member of the family, and the ordinals like mortal peril or bed or working were around the outside, so you could sort of see how the family was doing. Which I think this is really interesting, because I think the opportunity may be not in embedding more social communication things in our pocketable devices, but spreading them thinly around our environments like fixtures, like a big clock in the kitchen, or picture frames. This was a colleague of mine, Ben Resner at the Media Lab at MIT, that embedded squeeze sensors in the corner of a frame that would correspond to glowing someplace else in the world, so you could sort of blow somebody a kiss. And some of my students at MIT did hangsters where you'd tell the presence of your social network because they were on a Calder-like mobile and they drop down when your friends are online. The third wish is for protection. If you're doing it right, I mean, there are a lot of enchanted objects that are about weaponry in the literature. I think maybe done best was in the post-Vietnam era, these guys could set phasers to stun so that you could conquer new worlds without annihilating the locals, or at least discover new worlds. And maybe that's paralleled today in the taser that we all own. Another form of protection is being able to be a fly on the wall, or be able to to be there without your presence known. A lot of superheroes have this capability. And the same creepy desire is evidenced in these toys where you can spy on the babysitter because there's a camera in the eye of your teddy bear if you search online. For the last 3 years, I've been working on a company called Vitality that's really worked on embedding computing and connectivity into everyday objects in the interest of helping people be healthier. The state of Florida will have you believe that the Fountain of Youth is located somewhere there, but it's been a fantasy for a long time. One of the first prototypes we did was a mirror that showed you trends in blood pressure and steps walked and weather and weight, all sort of superimposed on your body, which seemed poetic. And for the last couple of years, I've been working on medication packaging. There are 3.5 billion of these that are distributed in the US every year, and for which people take the medication about 50% of the time. So we developed a little nightlight that shows you that you need to pay attention to one of your meds. It's over behind the knife, and embedded a cellular modem in the nightlight that connects to as many caps as you have in your house. And then we worked with behavioral economists and pharmacists and doctors to figure out what would be the motivational nudges that you could apply in parallel to help people remember to take medication, share an accountability feedback loop with a caregiver. This is the report that's sent for transplant patients back to their doctor so that the doctor can support them in keeping the new liver or kidney. And if you look at the data, this is when we deploy glow caps to just sense data, and we don't turn any of the services on. People take their meds about 70% of the time. This was a hypertension population. We turn on the services, it's over 98% of the time. So it's a big behavior shift. And we're doing that now with blister packs in Europe. These are 2 watches that we're working on. I haven't shown these before, but the watches have galvanic skin response and heart rate variability sensor built into the bottom of the watch. And then it tries to create a positive feedback loop for helping you understand what time it is, what your schedule is, which is wrapped around the perimeter of the watch. You can see somebody has an appointment at 2 and 3 and 5. And then also the background texture helps you understand your current state of stress. I don't know if these are going to encourage more stress or... This is testing lung functionality is really important for asthmatics, but these spirometers are these awful medicalized objects. Our inspiration was kazoo. By embedding a little pico projector in the kazoo and you blow it, you make this little spirograph pattern on the wall. And that's fun, and it makes a fun sound, and that's something you want to do every day. The last thing I wanted to show you is this is not built, this is a sketch. But with the falling this idea really illustrates the combination of object plus service. This object has a 360-degree camera and a pico projector inside and a cellular modem. It basically takes pictures of things around it because the salt is sitting in the middle of the table anyway. And then Mechanical Turk-like outsources the interpretation of those images and then in real time projects images of the food, of the caloric balance of the food adjacent to the food to try to influence people to just to have a better sense of what's going on. I think we all want to fly. This has been a fantasy for a long time with flying carpets. Ford did a serious feasibility study in the 50s to determine, and they determined that that we all could have flying cars. The Jetsons popularized this. There's a startup in Boston called Terrafugia that's trying to get approval on this device today. But I think for most of us, the sort of enchanted objects around transportation have more to do with reducing the pain of waiting or the pain of not knowing when you're waiting for the bus or ride share. You already have the data embedded in GPS pucks on buses in San Francisco. This was a sketch for a bus pole that would allow you to see from a block away if you needed to hurry up and to get the bus, or if you could do some shopping in the meantime. Lastly, I just wanted to show you a couple of examples of, I think, the last fantasy, which is, I think, something that once the rest of the hierarchy is taken care of, the sort of self-expression. And the objects that I think are most inspiring around self-expression, I think we all had hoped that the robots would have, by now, taken care of all of the housework and, child care and other problems that you have during the day. But today we only have these little stupid sweepers that don't that don't do my dishes or anything.
Of robotics at your command,
maybe you can turn the sound down.
New
I
ways
worked
to
about 15 years ago on a project with Lego. Seymour Papert calls the assemblage opportunity of Legos bricolage, because you can imagine something and then build it without having to know how to whittle wood or carve stone. This product embedded sensors. It embeds sensors so you can not only build what you imagine, but also program what you imagine with a very simple programming language. And there's a startup in San Francisco you may know who, Dave Merrill gave a fantastic TED talk with introducing this idea of Siftio, which are blocks that have that same bricolage. They have little screens, they know their adjacency to other blocks, and they support a lot of gameplay. This was a student project from our group at the Media Lab trying to reinvent painting. Other friends at the Media Lab started this company called Guitar Hero, and I think the real big idea here was, and the way that they sort of made the enchanted guitar was, it really inverts the learning curve, as you all know, because you start off being able to perform in front of a crowd, and then gradually makes the game harder and harder. So so now with the current version, you're actually doing one-to-one Van Halen, solos. At least you are. So, so I think taken together, here's some inspiration for this. This is your app store. This is the things to prioritize. It comes from a place of understanding fantasies, understanding people's desires, and maybe explains why some technologies fail and others succeed. So if you're in the software business, I think you should try to leverage enchanted objects because it makes interface easier, it makes the objects more present, and it makes the data more glanceable, and ultimately your service succeeds. And if you're in the objects business, if you're an industrial designer, you should think, as my friend Mike Kuniowski, who wrote this really nice book called Smart Things, said, think of objects just as avatars for services. where they're rich service layers that underlie or should underlie all the objects in our life. And here's a little bit of a level up challenge for you. Think of the regular bathroom scale. Maybe the first thing you do if you're enchanting a regular bathroom scale is you think about augmentation. Maybe the scale should store data. That would be different than my bathroom scale. The next level up may be personalization. Maybe it knows who's on it and gives you a weight goal. Maybe socialization is the next level. This scale actually tweets your weight. The next level up may be gamification, where you employ game mechanics like leveling up or point systems in order to achieve a goal. And I think the sort of the last rise, spiraling up or leveling up opportunity for enchanted objects is to think about storification, which I know is an awkward word, but I think it means embedding the experience of whatever it is into a larger narrative. So instead of just stepping on the scale, you think about that moment in the morning, and maybe stepping on the scale triggers horoscopes or the weather forecasts or a coach that you're letting down if you haven't lost weight, or some other agency. So hopefully the answer to, so which objects should we enchant, I've tried to give you a little bit of an insight around, and I encourage you guys to be the next enchanters. Thanks very much.